Hi, good afternoon, it's Dean from maverickstar Observatory. I want to go on to talk about in this video how close we are to that 40-degree mark, and in terms of time, how long do we have before we possibly cross that line. So what is the 40-degree mark? Well, it derived from some experiments that we was doing with stationary magnets and stationary compass needles, and what we found when we move either the magnet around the compass needle, it got to around 40 degrees of migration, where at that point at 40 degrees it would rock backwards and forwards unstably, and then if we just pushed a little bit further with the magnet or the compass, whichever way we was doing it, and it works both the same for either way you do it, so you either have a stationary magnet or a stationary compass and you move the magnetic field around that, or you move the compass around the magnetic field, same results. But what we found by studying this, and it was repeated, the experiment, so there's no reason why, doing it the way we did it, it shouldn't be the same for when the pole crosses the 40-degree mark. It's theoretical, but it's plausible and logical that it should do and behave the same. So what happens when it goes past that 40-degree mark? So it slowly moves gradually to the 40-degree mark, starts to become unstable, where it wobbles, excessively around that 40-degree point. But if you go just beyond that point, it rapidly flicks over to the opposite pole, and that's what we predict will happen when it gets to around about the 40-degree mark. So a couple of things I wanted to talk to you guys about the 40-degree mark and where we are right now. As you can see, we're over the mid-North Atlantic ridge. You can see the ridge where it's on, it's a little bit bumpy on the bottom of the seabed, and you will note that 5 months ago, when we started to cross the threshold of the North Atlantic ridge, we also noticed an uptick in speed. And this has, along that North Atlantic ridge, some active volcanoes. So maybe the reason for why we're seeing that 20% increase over the last 5 months is because we began 5 months ago to cross that Atlantic ridge in the northern hemisphere of the planet. So when we get to 40 degrees mark, we leave theoretically the strong field lines, which enables a pole that's migrating to migrate a lot slower and more stably, and then once we pass the 40-degree mark, we should see some acceleration and destabilization of the pole, where it starts to act erratically. How many months are we away? 17.4 based on its current speed and trajectory. We should cross that mark around February 2023, so 17.4 miles away or thereabouts. 17.4 months away or thereabouts. So not very long in terms of time. We're now getting to the nitty gritty. After over 100 years of steady pole migration, we're starting to see, as we get closer to this point, an acceleration. Now that could be because we are about to cross the 40-degree mark in 17.4 months, or it has accelerated for some reason as we began to cross over the North Atlantic ridge. It yet to be remain what happens when we get to the 40-degree mark. I believe before we get to that 40-degree mark, and before we pass the equilibrium point of the the North Atlantic ridge, I believe we will start to see some destabilization in its behavior. In other words, we'll see it deviate a lot more backwards and forwards as it gets closer and closer to the 40-degree mark. What does that mean then for our magnetosphere strength and the climate on the planet? Well, during the magnetic reversal, when it goes into the weak field lines, what will happen is the pole will reverse quicker. So at some point there will be neither a north pole or a south pole at that point, or, as has been theoretically assumed, there could be multiple poles all over the planet. But I believe that if that is the case, we will see a weakening of the magnetosphere, and if that is the case, we're going to get an increase in cosmic radiation, and we know the effects that has on the jet stream. We've seen the effects over the last 30 years with the 30-year acceleration, and then we've got this recent acceleration now that we've seen in the last 5 months. I am predicting that during the last 5 months, and from this point on, if it continues to hold that 20% increase on the 30-year migration speed, then this is a new chapter in the behaviour of the poles. I believe we are going to start seeing weather continuing to decline, and we're going to see a lot more disasters around the world relating to droughts, probably earlier forest seasons than we would have expected, and floods is one of the major disasters that we're seeing an increase in. And you've got to remember this as well. I said this, that if the mainstream organisations and news medias are going to accept that we are now in a time where we are witnessing more floods, then there has to be an acceptance that something has got cooler, and therefore the global warming idea has to go out the window, because the only reason you get precipitation fall from the skies is solely caused through cooling. And if we are seeing more floods, then we are obviously having more cooling periods. So at some point they have to check what they've been saying is accurate, because it becomes unbelievable to the general public, because it just doesn't simply make any sense. You can't have something getting warmer and precipitation at the same time. It only precipitates or starts to rain when we have a cooling effect, when that can no longer hold on to that level of humidity and it cools, it starts to condense and drop out the skies. That's rain or precipitation. So they have to start coming clean at some point, I believe, from now, because they are, as we already know, accepting the fact that floods are on the increase, and floods are caused through flash flooding, heavy downpours of rain, and as a result of the heavy rains we're getting, you must therefore have a sudden cooling. So when they talk about global warming now, they have to address this and come clean on it, because it is far from the fact of global warming. All the evidence is there that states it's global cooling, and therefore if they accept that, then they have to relook at the CO2 model as well, for blaming mankind on changing the climate, because man can't be blamed for cooling the planet at the same time as warming the planet. So we're not far off. That's the bottom line, guys, but there's more important things, I believe. If we're going to keep monitoring this, then we really need to address an elephant in the room, and that is the deficit of this observatory over the last 19 or so months. And I know yesterday there was a noticeable effort with people trying to help raise some money, but we need to do a lot more than that and a lot sooner than that. We did manage to raise just under £200 yesterday for the observatory, and that still hasn't took us over the average level of revenue that we raised for this observatory 4 months ago. Things have declined, and the problem is with that is we are now at a situation here at the observatory where I have to draw the line at some point and say no more. Can I keep digging into my pockets and putting in to keep the observatory going? What people really need to understand is that there are running costs for this observatory, and even though they're not big running costs, if they're not met, those costs, then we simply can't operate. And there is a deadline now. So the beginning of the new year, if we cannot do something about this deficit, we're going to have to probably put up with disruptions to the services, basically, like that once every month recalculating the exact position of the magnetic North Pole, and other services like Earth's Health at a glance, and probably regular updates to the website as well. And I think it would be a big shame if we are 17.4 months away from probably one of the biggest events in mankind, that if we was to close it now, it would have been all a waste of time. I think you would agree. But we've got a little bit of time. There is some more cash I can afford to put in, but after that point, I have to say enough is enough. So I'm hoping that jointly together, and there are 32,000 subscribers, but I always say this, if you've got 2,000 people viewing your videos, every video, then that's your subscribers. because that's the ones that are regularly tuning in every time you publish a video. But even so, that amount of money split between a couple of thousand people would not be, in my view, a lot of money to fork out for each of us. And guys, first of all, I want to say this: you're probably experiencing, or maybe not, some hardships. You've had to make some cutbacks, and guess what? So have I. I'm exactly the same as you guys, and yet I'm still prepared to chuck in some more money on this. And it'd be great if there was a few more like-minded people like yesterday that was also prepared to do what is necessary to keep this observatory going at, I think you'll agree, its most critical time. Only a few months ago there was an observatory monitoring volcanism, and the volcano erupted, and there was no early warning signs for those people. 30 people lost their lives, and the reason for that not being, the warning not going out from that observatory is because it had been underfunded, understaffed, and the equipment had been allowed to fall into a dilapidated estate, and it was almost impossible for it to do what it was intended to do originally. We aren't there yet. All the equipment we've got is running. We've got to do a couple of recalls on some of the equipment, which is standard maintenance on that equipment, but it just makes sure that the equipment that we've got out in the field is up and running and usable and doing its best it can possibly do. So yeah, that's where we stand. We're 17 months away, based on the 5 mile a month migration. I estimated it to be around about 87 miles. I know it's showing 88.68, but it's around about that. So it gives you an idea as to when all this could possibly start unfolding. And there's no reason why it couldn't start unfolding now, because in terms of distance and how far that pole's already migrated to date over the last 100 years, I don't think 87 miles is a lot in terms of distance, and therefore we could see anything happen at this point. And we're still not sure whether the fact that we crossed the Atlantic Ridge over the Northern Hemisphere has been the result of that 20% increase of migration. And that could be for a multitude of reasons. Could be that the fluid dynamics under that region are in a more viscous manner, and therefore we're starting to see this migrate faster as a result of that. It could be something else. But it is strange that as we started to cross over the ridge, we picked up that there was probably around, on average, 20% over the last 5 months of increasing distance over time. So guys, I'm hoping that we can raise a bit more money, and we don't have to shut the doors in January, the new year, and we can continue going on forward as we get close to that 40-degree mark. And of course, to do that, more people, you need to use that link down in the description. There's a lot worse things you can invest a few bucks in at this time. I think you'll agree with me. This is an event that really should be kept an eye on, because of more than one reason. First of all, the mainstream organisations aren't coming clean about it, yet this is one of the biggest events that's ever happened in human history, and probably for the last 780,000 years the biggest geological anomaly that has took place. And it does have some serious implications either way you look at it. So hoping that more people do pay attention to that and take that under consideration. Links there, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll be back tomorrow. Kendall's sent us some data that we're going to get through, so we're going to process that and put that on the website, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. Meanwhile, enjoy the rest of your day. As always, bye for now.